Every decision they make can have an effect on our lives.
Well, I'm not a crook.
We had to push and shove our way through a crowd of several hundred Vietnamese.
My fellow Americans, I've said on several occasions that I wouldn't comment about the recent congressional hearings on the Iran-Contra matter.
Skies over Baghdad have been illuminated.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
Immediately, there's speculation or cause for concern. This is the World Trade Center that was the center of a terrorist bombing.
What difference at this point does it make?
Protesters have now broken into the U.S. Capitol.
This is Our Lives in Politics on the America Out Loud Network with your host Booker Scott and Lou Basada.
We all know that the First Amendment is freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and if there is any subject that should be bipartisan, one would think this one is a no-brainer. But in these times, it's just not that simple. French philosopher Voltaire, who was the founder or forefather of the separation of church and state and freedom of speech, said it this way: "I may not agree with what you have to say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it." A couple of years ago, I put a series of social media posts out along the same lines, and you can search Booker Spartacus Differences Simplified on Twitter to see those. But here's one of them as an example. The differences between us and them. Their ideology demands I change my ideology. My ideology demands I defend with my life their ideology. Differences Simplified. These hearings featured witnesses that are not conservatives. In fact, they are American journalists, award-winning journalists. And both are Joe Biden voters. They aren't MAGA. These aren't American First people. But what this hearing showed is that Democrats in the House of Representatives, they don't care about the rights of the press, the rights of Americans' free speech. They only care about power, control. They want to control the narrative. They want to control free speech. And of course, to do that, they have to approve what speech can be said. Remember Weird Gal Yankovic, the minister of truth, the truth czar? President Biden tried to install her. For what purpose? I'm Booker Scott. Thanks for joining me for this quick 20 minutes of truth. And let's start with a closer look at our elected officials. These are our representatives. They are doing the people's business, as they always say. They can walk and chew gum at the same time. And maybe they are a true reflection of our society today.
And you guys don't care. You don't care.
You don't want the 2011
people to see.
consent decree?
You don't want the American people to see what happened, the full video, transparency. You don't want that, and you don't want two journalists who have been named personally by the Biden administration, FTC, in a letter.
The Biden administration.
And you're saying they're here to help us. They're here to tell their story. And frankly, I think they're brave individuals for being willing to come after they've been named in a letter from the Biden FTC.
Is this your question time now?
No, I'm responding to your ridiculous statements you made in your opening statement.
Okay, well, let's get on with it.
Oh, now we want to get on with it. So you can say all the things you want, and I
did in my opening statement, as well as you had an opening statement. You said what you needed to say in your opening statement, and I, as the ranking member, have used my time.
Without objection, all other opening statements will be included in the record. We will introduce today's witness, Matt Taibbi.
It is a true reflection of where our society is today, and you should know that much of the bickering that you just heard there continued throughout the hearing. But there were obviously a couple of different narratives that were trying to be put forth from both sides of this hearing, the Republicans and the Democrats. And keep in mind that the two journalists that are here testifying before these members of Congress is Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberger. Both are Democrats. Both voted for Joe Biden. They really don't have anything politically in this game. What they are concerned about is protection of the First Amendment, the protection of the press, protection of the American people to have free speech, and the weaponization of our federal government. What has the federal government done to silence us, to censor us? We know because of the truth that has come from the Twitter files, which both of these gentlemen were a part of the Twitter files. What were the Democrats going after? What is their objective in all of this? Shouldn't it really be about our rights as Americans? But that's not their concern.
This isn't just a matter of what data was given to these so-called journalists before us now. There are many legitimate questions about where Musk got the financing to buy Twitter.
It's about Musk's financing to buy Twitter. That's what this hearing is. It isn't about the weaponization of the federal government to spy on Americans, to shut down free speech. That's not what the Democrats are concerned about. They are concerned about speech getting out. They're concerned about the narrative.
My name is Matt Taibbi. I've been a reporter for 30 years and a staunch advocate of the First Amendment. Much of that time was spent at Rolling Stone magazine. Ranking Member Plaskett, I'm not a so-called journalist. I've won the National Magazine Award, the I.F. Stone Award for Independent Journalism, and I've written 10 books, including 4 New York Times bestsellers.
And you hear there Matt Taibbi defending himself and his record as a true American journalist and a First Amendment rights advocate. You know, the Democrats stayed on this path, not about free speech and not about the weaponization of the federal government to censor us, but they made it about the two gentlemen that are testifying. It wasn't about free speech. Every one of the Democratic representatives came at these two gentlemen in the same type of way. Now, keep in mind, they are Democrats themselves. Here is Ranking Member Plaskett.
Who gave you access to these emails? Who was the individual that gave you permission to access the emails?
Well, the attribution from my story is sources at Twitter, and that's what I'm going to refer to.
Okay. Did Mr. Musk contact you, Mr. Taibbi?
Again, the attribution from my story is sources at Twitter.
Mr. Schellenberger, did Mr. Musk contact you?
Actually, no. I was brought in by my friend Barry Weiss, and so this story, there's been a lot of misinformation.
So Mr. Weiss brought you in.
And notice there she said Mr. Weiss. Barry Weiss is a female. That's how out of touch the Democrats are with this story. They don't care about the story. They don't care about the censorship. They care about getting at the narrative. Controlling the narrative. That's what their game is. Now, the questioning didn't stop there about sources. They care more about the sources. They care more about Elon Musk than they do about the truth.
Again, Congressman, when you're asking me you're asking a journalist to reveal a source.
So then you consider Mr. Musk to be the direct source of all this?
No, now you're trying to get me to say that he is the source. I just can't answer your question.
Well, he isn't. If you're telling me you can't answer because it's your source, well, then the only logical conclusion is that he is, in fact, your source.
Well, you're free to conclude that.
Well, sir, I just don't understand. You can't have it both ways, but let's move on because
no, he can. He's a journalist.
No, he can't because either Musk is the source and he can't talk about it, or Musk is not the source. And if Musk is not the source, then he can discuss.
No one has yielded. The gentlelady's out of order. You don't get to speak.
She's out of order because he's
recognized.
interrupted.
The gentlelady's not recognized.
You're not recognizing my time.
He has not said that. What he has said is he's not going to reveal his source, and the fact that Democrats are pressuring him to do so is such a
We're asking him about his conversations with Musk.
The gentlelady has not yielded you time. You don't get
I have not yielded time to anybody. I want to reclaim my time, and I would ask the chairman to give me back some of the time because of the interruption.
I deny it, and I claim my time right now. And you see more of the bickering going on in this hearing that happened on Capitol Hill. But you also hear the Democrats are really going after both of these witnesses to reveal sources. Journalists don't ever reveal sources. It's gone all the way to the Supreme Court, but yet the Democrats feel it is so important. It is so important to shut down the narrative and make this hearing about something that it's not, that they continue to go after it.
And you said you had none, but you yourself posted that you had conditions.
No, the conditions, as I've explained multiple times.
No, sir, you've not explained. You told her in response to her question that you had no conditions. In fact, you kind of used the word license, that you were free to look at all of them, all 100,000 emails.
The question was posed, was I free to write about?
Sir, did you have any conditions?
The condition was that we published on Twitter.
Sir, did you have any conditions, yes or no? A simple question.
Yes.
All right, could you tell us what conditions those were?
The conditions were an attribution, sources at Twitter, and that we break any news on Twitter.
That's Representative Garcia, a Democrat there, going at Matt Taibbi. And really, what is the hearing about? We're going to start hearing the differences between the Republicans and the Democrats in this exchange. This is Representative, a Democrat, Conley, trying to wrap this up for the Democrats.
In some ways, what you just said undermines the premise of this select committee, which is that the federal government has been organized to weaponize against conservative voices. And of course, what you've just indicated in your testimony is, well, actually, that's not the evidence you found.
No, I think this committee, my understanding is that they're concerned about the weaponization of the government against free speech, which is certainly what we're finding.
Thank you. My time has expired, but I appreciate your understanding of our committee. I have a different understanding. I yield back.
Well, you got the wrong understanding. Last week in the full Judiciary Committee hearing, I introduced into the record a story of a left-wing journalist who said that talked about the FBI putting a paid informant, a felon, in the Black Lives Matter movement in Denver. I want to focus on the First Amendment, just like protecting the First Amendment, just like these guys
Point
do.
of order, Mr. Chair. Are you going to respond after every?
No, I'm taking my 5 minutes.
This is
I can take my 5 minutes.
It's your 5 minutes now?
I can take my 5 minutes when I want to, and I'm taking my 5 minutes
Okay,
now.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I would ask for an additional few seconds for being interrupted by the ranking member.
You never think about your belt as being disgusting and filled with germs and bacteria. But what's the first thing you touch after using the restroom before you've washed your hands and you've never cleaned it? Your belt. Whether your belt is nylon or leather, both materials absorb moisture and either can't be washed or washing destroys them. You need the Super Belt. The Super Belt is not leather. It's an amazing webbing coated in a special polymer which makes it completely waterproof and antimicrobial. You can wash it, even clean it with bleach. This belt is nearly indestructible and made in America. Go to thesuperbelt.com to learn more about this incredible belt, which will last you the rest of your life. Thesuperbelt.com.
Hello everyone, Lou Bazada here, co-host and producer of this great show, Our Lives in Politics. And on behalf of Booker Scott and myself, I would personally like to take a few moments to thank each and every one of you for listening and supporting our show. I would also like to take the opportunity to invite you to our website, UnifiedOneAmerica.com. Again, that's unified, O-N-E, America.com. Thank you so much, and please join us there and subscribe.
Getting back to the hearing on the weaponization of the federal government against American citizens. Now, Representative Mike Johnson, a Republican.
It is a bedrock principle of our constitutional system that the government does not get to decide what speech is acceptable or true. Under the First Amendment, Americans have a right to speak freely, regardless of whether their speech upsets the preferred narrative. In fact, that's when it needs the most vigorous protection. Everybody on the left used to believe in that, or at least they purported to. Government and media fact checkers frequently get things wrong. The American people can't and shouldn't rely on so-called experts to be the arbiters of truth, disinformation boards and the like. It doesn't matter what political party you're in, government should not suppress important debates and public discourse.
That should make a lot of sense to almost every American. For some reason, it really doesn't make any sense to the Democrats on this hearing committee. It's a subcommittee on the weaponization of our federal government, which obviously we have had, and it's been revealed from the Twitter files recently, up to Twitter file number 17, I believe now. If you haven't read through them, you really should to start getting some truth. Here's Representative Matt Gaetz.
While we've only heard from Democrats on this panel attacking you, discrediting you, a lot like they've tried to attack and discredit FBI whistleblowers who are truth tellers, there are brave Democrats who still believe in free speech. And I would advise my colleagues to look at the comments of Ro Khanna, who has been deeply, deeply concerned about this weaponization of government. And he believes these Twitter files are indeed worthy of our focus and our energy. And that is exactly what we are going to do. I yield back.
That's kind of the flavor of this hearing. You hear the Democrats going at the messengers, which is Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberger. And you hear the Republicans saying this is about free speech, whether it's the left or the right, whether it's conservative or Democrat, it shouldn't matter in all of this. There's so much more at stake for this country. Now, let's start listening to what the people that came to testify, the two American journalists who happen to be Democrats, let's hear what they have to say. Let's start with Michael Schellenberger.
Today, American taxpayers are unwittingly financing the growth and power of a censorship industrial complex run by America's scientific and technological elite, which endangers our liberties and democracy. I'm grateful for this opportunity to offer this testimony and sound the alarm over the shocking and disturbing emergence of state-sponsored censorship in the United States of America. The Twitter files, state attorneys general lawsuits, and investigative reporters have revealed a large and growing network of government agencies, academic institutions, and non-governmental organizations that are actively censoring American citizens, often without their knowledge, on a range of issues. I do not know how much of the censorship is coordinated beyond what we have been able to document, and I will not speculate.
I always said it was important that Elon Musk chose the messengers that he chose. He chose American journalists that were not biased to the right, but maybe a little bit leaning to the left. At least the publications that they've written for in the past were. I'm not going to speak for them. I'm going to let them speak for themselves. Here's Matt Taibbi.
I'm here today because of a series of events that began late last year when I received a note from a source online. It read, "Are you interested in doing a deep dive into what censorship and manipulation was going on at Twitter?" A week later, the first of what became known as the Twitter Files reports came out. To say these attracted intense public interest would be an understatement. My computer looked like a Vegas slot machine as just the first tweet about the blockage of the Hunter Biden laptop story registered 143 million impressions and 30 million engagements. But it wasn't until a week after the first report, after Michael Schellenberger, Barry Weiss, and other researchers joined the search of the files, that we started to grasp the significance of this story. The original promise of the internet was that it might democratize the exchange of information globally. A free internet would overwhelm all attempts to control information flow, its very existence a threat to anti-democratic forms of government everywhere. What we found in the files was a sweeping effort to reverse that promise and use machine learning and other tools to turn the internet into an instrument of censorship and social control. Unfortunately, our own government appears to be playing a lead role. We saw the first hints in communications between Twitter executives before the 2020 election, when we read things like "flagged by DHS" or "please see attached report from FBI for potential misinformation." This would be attached to an Excel spreadsheet with a long list of names whose accounts were often suspended shortly after. Again, Ranking Member Plaskett, I would note that the evidence of Twitter-government relationship includes lists of tens of thousands of names on both the left and right. The people affected include Trump supporters, but also left-leaning sites like Consortium and Truthout, the leftist South American channel Telesur, the Yellow Vest movement. That, in fact, is a key point of the Twitter files, that it's neither a left nor right issue. Following the trail of communications between Twitter and the federal government across tens of thousands of emails led to a series of revelations. Mr. Chairman, we summarized and submitted them to the committee in the form of a new Twitter Files thread, which was also released to the public this morning. We learned Twitter, Facebook, Google, and other companies developed a formal system for taking in moderation requests from every corner of government, from the FBI, the DHS, the HHS, DOD, the Global Engagement Center at State, even the CIA. For every government agency scanning Twitter, there were perhaps 20 quasi-private entities doing the same thing, including Stanford's Election Integrity Partnership, NewsGuard, the Global Disinformation Index, and many others, many taxpayer-funded.
So now you hear the truth is starting to come out in these hearings. Is it going to matter in the long run? Are enough people paying attention to this? But I want you to pay attention to something he said. I'm going to play it again for you because I think it's so important. Pay attention to Matt Taibbi.
Twitter, Facebook, Google, and other companies developed a formal system for taking in moderation requests from every corner of government, from the FBI, the DHS, the HHS, DOD, the Global Engagement Center at State, even the CIA. For every government agency scanning Twitter, there were perhaps 20 quasi-private entities doing the same thing.
So we're hearing the truth come out from these guys, and it's scary. Left and right, conservative, liberal, Democrat, Republican, it really shouldn't matter. The truth should always matter. And when it comes to the First Amendment and free speech, it really should matter because that keeps us a free country. The thing is, the Democrats in this hearing just don't understand what the hearing is about. Let's go to this congressman. This guy is Dan Goldman. And let me say, I proudly endorse 4patriots.com. And on behalf of them, I will be sending a tool bag to Dan Goldman. He is a real tool bag among tool bags in the U.S. House of Representatives. And just for a little background, he was the lead counsel on Donald Trump's first impeachment. He now represents the 10th District of New York, and he is trying to say that there is no government collusion with big tech and social media. Listen to this.
Are you trying to say that the FBI had no basis to inform social media companies about efforts to potentially interfere in our elections after 2016?
I can tell you that I read internal Twitter emails where Twitter expressly talked about the fact that the FBI couldn't possibly know more than they did about whether or not there was Russian interference, and that in fact even they couldn't determine which accounts were actually IRA and which ones weren't.
Okay, I understand you like to filibuster. That was not an answer to my question.
It sounded like an answer to his question to me, but let's let this tool bag Dan Goldman ask another question of Taibbi.
Do you think it's a legitimate objective of the FBI to stop foreign interference in our elections?
I think it's a legitimate objective to stop actual foreign interference.
It's the one and only Digo Double G.
That is awesome.
Do you think it's a legitimate objective of the FBI to stop foreign interference in our elections?
I think it's a legitimate objective to stop actual foreign interference.
It's the one and only Digo Double G. Snoop Dogg.
I love Snoop Dogg. Now let's get to a serious question, and I think this is the most important thing that happened in this hearing during the day. This is Dan Goldman again, questioning about whether there is actually government involvement. Is the government directly telling Twitter and other social media platforms to shut down speech?
Mr. Schellenberger, in all of the emails that you reviewed, did the FBI ever direct Twitter to take down any accounts or remove any posts?
Yes.
They directed Twitter to remove them, or they said these may violate your terms and services?
Yes. I think that's an accurate use of the word direct.
And here comes the big closing argument from Dan Goldman, the tool bag in the U.S. House of Representatives. He is going to say there is no direct evidence that the government told Twitter to do anything. The interesting part here is that Chairman Jim Jordan has in his hands information that says otherwise, that the Democrats have no idea is coming. You should see their faces as this happens.
And even with Twitter, you cannot find actual evidence of any direct government censorship of any lawful speech. And when I say lawful, I mean non-criminal speech, because plenty of speech is non-criminal.
I'll give you one. The gentleman's time to expire. I'd ask unanimous consent to enter into the record the following email from Clark Humphrey, Executive Office of the Presidency, White House Office, January 23rd, 2021, that's the Biden administration, 4:39 a.m. Hey, folks, this goes to Twitter. Hey, folks, wanted to use the term they used the term Mr. Goldman just used. Wanted to flag the below tweet, and I'm wondering if we can get moving on the process for having it removed ASAP.
Boom.
That is.
Could you read the below tweet?
And then if we can keep an eye out for tweets that fall in this same genre, that would be great. This is a tweet on the very issue that Thomas
Can you just, for the fullness of the record, can you read because I've not seen this, can you read the tweet that it's referencing?
I don't have the tweet here with me, but the gentleman's point was, tell us, you said no time did government try to tell Twitter to take that, to explicitly remove something, and
no, I said explicitly remove lawful speech. Lawful speech. We're going to conflate. The First Amendment is not absolute.
Twitter, this is something from Robert Kennedy Jr.
But for the record,
I assume that's lawful speech.
As a point of order, Mr. Chair.
Because Robert Kennedy Jr. said it? That's why it's lawful speech?
Just a minute, Mr. Goldman.
But all I'm saying is you said in no time did the government explicitly say to take a tweet down. Here we have it, right here, from the White House. They couldn't even wait 2 days. 2 days into this administration, they were asked Twitter to take something down, and we will get you the underlying tweet.
Thank you.
With that, I recognize the gentlelady from New York.
Will you place it into the record as well, sir? The underlying tweet?
Robert Kennedy Jr. Is talking about he's talking about Hank Aaron's death after he received the vaccine. That's what the tweet's about. We'll get you a copy.
So the whole thing was about a tweet about Hank Aaron's death when he died and the vaccine. So there was the proof that the government is telling Twitter and other big social media to shut down free speech. The Democrats aren't interested in the truth. They're not interested in free speech. They're interested in power and control. Ask yourself why. I mentioned a few days ago about the 25th Amendment and the removal of President Joe Biden. Here is your daily reminder that this is not what we want at this time.
I mean, one of the young leaders was talking to me about climate mental health. I said, tell me what's going on with your peers. Climate mental health. And she talked, I said, I think I understand that, but unpack it for me. And she talked about how her peers are thinking about it. One example is, whether when they're ready, could they start a family? Yes. Worried about what that would mean. And the stress of it. They were talking about it in terms of their peers trying to figure out, they're going to have to get a job and they're going to have to make a living, but what can they do and how can they adapt the education that they're having now to their activism?
What did she just say? What did Kamala just say? The 25th Amendment, really, that's not even an option. We're going to have to hang on for a couple of more years, and we will pray for Joe Biden's health, believe it or not. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you've learned some truth in this half hour. I'm Booker Scott. Thank you so much.